Hello out there, my name is Laolu Akonde and you are on to Inside Sources. But first today, I will be skipping my take because we're going to have two different perspectives on what it is that has happened in the last 2 years under the Tinubu presidency. We're going to open with Mr. Reno Omokri, a former presidential spokesperson, and then we're going to end with Professor Udenta, the founding National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy. Both of them have unique views and very different views about what has happened in the first 2 years of the Tinubu presidency. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today we continue our conversation on the 2-year review of the Tinubu administration. And my guest today is a notable Nigerian social media influencer and a former presidential spokesperson. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, Mr. Reno Omokri. Reno, good to see you in that your traditional outfit.
Well, that's all I wear, you know, grow Naira, buy Niger. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's just get right to it. Alhaji Abubakar Atiku and Mr. Peter Obi, they were not very flattering in their review of the president's 2-year in office. How do you respond to that, Mr. Reno?
I'm going to take both of them on. I'll start with Peter Obi. First and foremost, Peter Obi was being very dishonest, and I can prove it to you. Peter Obi used to be chairman of a bank, had majority shares. Now he has about 10% shares in that bank. That bank, I'm not going to mention the name of the bank because I respect them and I don't want them to think that I'm going after them. But last year, the bank declared profit of 124.3 billion naira. This year, and they just released their figures about a month ago, they declared profit of 385.4 billion naira. So their profit has increased by more than 3, by a multiple of times 3, more than that. So I'm going to ask you a question now. If Peter Obi is saying that the economy is not growing, the president is not handling the economy very well, how come his own bank, where he has 10% shares, has increased in profitability by over 3 times? That's 300%, over 300%. It is not possible. His statement is contradictory to his finance situation. So he's about 64 years old. In his entire life, at no time has he been as profitable as in this last year under President Tinubu. And the reason why is because President Tinubu is handling the economy very well. We've seen that now we have a trade surplus of about $14 billion, actually $14.1 billion. It's never happened before. What's a trade surplus? When you are exporting more than you are importing. That's a good sign of the health of the economy. Peter Obi is not smarter than Fitch. Fitch is the #1 ratings agency in the whole world, bar none. Standard & Poor's and Knight Frank, they all come after Fitch. And Fitch has upgraded Nigeria's economy to a stable B. Don't forget, this is the same Fitch that downgraded the United States economy for the first time ever. They upgraded our economy. So what is Peter Obi talking about? Now, with due respect to Alhaji Waziri Atiku Abubakar, you know, this is a man I respect so much. So even though I disagree with what he said, I'm not going to address it because of the respect that I have for him. All I would say is that President Tinubu met a debt profile of $108 billion. Right now, our debt is $94 billion. So it has reduced by $14 billion. So there is no way you can call such a person someone who's addicted to debt, someone who's reducing our national debt. With all due respect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has exceeded the expectations of most reasonable Nigerians. Why do I say so? He's reduced our debt. He's increased our trade surplus. In fact, we didn't even have a trade surplus before. He's increased it. If you are an investor, the All Shares Index, they've achieved 2 records under President Bola Tinubu. And this man came in, Nigeria was the #1 petrol importer in Africa. Right now, we are not. South Africa has now overtaken us. We are now instead the #1 petrol exporter in West Africa. So anybody saying that this man has not done well is just being political and they are not being truthful.
Very, as usual, Reno, you always come in with a lot of hard facts. But let's take it, away from, Mr. Peter Obi and Atiku. There are people that are doing well, just like you've shown that Peter Obi's bank is doing well. But do you think that the average Nigerian, the mass of our people who are still grilling under the economic pains, would you say that they are doing well? Won't you concede, like the administration has done, that there is still quite a bit of suffering in the land because of some of those reforms, which many of us agree are an imperative, you've got to do them, but there is still a lot of suffering in the land. Reno?
There is still a lot of suffering in the land. Nigeria is not a rich country. So if you have a father that is not rich and you're suffering, you can't be complaining and saying, well, I'm suffering, I'm suffering. No, your father is not rich. Nigeria is an oil-poor country. The reason why the Naira is now 1,560 to the dollar is not because President Bola Tinubu is a terrible president. No, it's because he started floating the Naira and stopped subsidizing the Naira. A lot of people who are ignorant, like Peter Obi, have cited the figure. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, he was saying when the Naira was 165 Naira to a dollar, people protested. Why are they not protesting now? I was presidential spokesman when the Naira was 165 Naira to a dollar. At that point in time, the Naira was being subsidized. Under Muhammadu Buhari, the Naira was being subsidized. So what you were seeing as a Nigerian wasn't the actual value of the Naira. The federal government of Nigeria was spending $1.5 billion every month to subsidize Naira. Please assume I'm a liar and go and fact check me. $1.5 billion every month subsidizing the Naira. And this was not money that we had. This was money that we were borrowing. Now, we weren't spending 1.5 billion every month on healthcare, on education, on roads. We were spending it subsidizing the Naira. And you know what, Laolu, I will stun you today. Do you know what Nigerians were using that money to do, the cheap dollars? Do you know what we're using it to do?
Go ahead, Reno.
We were spending $200 million annually on importing human hair for our women to wear, human hair. We were spending $75 million on French champagne. We were spending 25 million pounds on Scotch whiskey. So if we were subsidizing the Naira and then our people were spending it on transferring technology, buying heavy equipment, things that will make the economy better, it would even make sense to keep on subsidizing the Naira. But look at how we were pissing away the cheap dollars on very silly things. So the reason why we now have a trade surplus is because President Bola Tinubu has done what worked in Vietnam. He has floated the Naira and made imports so expensive that Nigerians have no other choice than to buy made in Nigeria. And look at me, everything I am wearing from head to toe is made in Nigeria. And that's how we are going to grow our economy.
Okay, now, would you suggest, since, it's very clear that you have, these views about the administration and, you do a good job in trying to articulate it as best as you could. But will you also suggest to the administration, or will you agree that this is no time for the administration or its officials to show any kind of ostentation? And we've seen quite a bit of it, Reno. What's your view on that? So you make this analysis, but we see the administration doing some rather ostentatious things, buying a new jet, even though it's refurbished, building the vice president's, house, 23 billion.
Let me step in there.
Please go ahead.
The Tinubu administration did not build the vice president's house. That project was started under our administration. Please fact check me. It was started under our
there's no doubt about that.
Continued.
There's no doubt about that.
No, but
the point is that.
Let me land.
Okay, all right.
But allow me land.
Please go ahead.
Please allow me land. It was started by our administration, continued by the Buhari administration. Now, after the project had gone 95% ahead, and then the Bola Tinubu administration comes and you say that they should now stop the 5%, then it is actually not going to be cost efficient. So that means you've wasted the 95%. So let's put things into perspective. You talked about the presidential jets. It is actually more expensive on a dollar cost averaging basis for the president to fly commercial. It's actually more expensive. That jet, you said the president bought a new jet. It's not a new jet. It's not a second-hand jet. It's a third-hand jet. Now, let's put it in perspective. The United States just commissioned a $2 billion presidential jet, Air Force One, $2 billion. The presidential jet that Bola Tinubu administration bought is less than 1% of that cost. So look at that now. No, sorry, not less than 1%. Sorry, I think it's about 100 and something million. So that would be like maybe probably about 10% of that, or less than 10%. That's about 5% of that. So if you put it into perspective, you've got to be very careful about making these kinds of sweeping statements that these are ostentatious things, because you're dealing with a man who is a first-class accountant. He graduated with a first class, or what they call in the United States, cum laude. So he makes decisions based on dollar cost averaging. And dollar cost averaging, for those who don't know, is that you put the various alternatives to a dollar cost, and then you go with the least expensive. And that's what he's done with the presidential jet. But if you recall, 2 weeks ago, this president launched what they call the Nigeria First policy. So that means that every government ministry, department, and agency must buy a made in Nigeria product where it's available rather than a foreign product. So we are seeing that the president is actually keeping to his words. Not only that, last year he issued out a policy and said from henceforth the president can only travel with, I think it was about 9 people, and then the vice president can only travel with a certain amount of people, and ministers can only travel with 2 people. This has not been done before in Nigeria, even under Muhammadu Buhari. So if you look at what's happening, I think the president is doing well in that regard.
Oh, well, it is true that you could argue for the cost effectiveness of some of these things. But my view, Reno, and then you will comment and then we move along, is that, yes, the new vice president residence has been built for has been ongoing, but I didn't see anything that compels the urgency of completing it. You could, and there was additional at least 7 billion naira more that was spent at that time to finish it. So I was thinking that, okay, well, to show that we don't want to show to Nigerians as if we are not sensitive, you could leave it, which was what Buhari did. Also, so that you can comment on everything together, the president promised that there was going to be a consolidation of MDAs, set up a panel that was chaired by the SGF. Now, a year has passed. We don't have any report. Whether that has happened or, as a matter of fact, it hasn't happened because we do know it hasn't happened. And then, on the issue of the travel costs, you are right. The presidential spokespeople announced that they are going to do that cost, and people applauded it. But up till now, nobody has told us, Reno, that, okay, this is how much has been saved from these travel costs. Your comments?
Well, I think first, I'll take the last issue first. I don't think that they even have to tell people how much has been saved, because what you can do as a Nigerian citizen, you got to understand that the 2025 Appropriation Act is a public document. You can read it. And in that Appropriation Act, you can actually look at the budget for traveling for the president and the vice president and compare it to previous budgets, not just last year's budget, compared to the budgets under Muhammadu Buhari, under President Goodluck Jonathan, under President Yar'Adua, and under President Obasanjo. I'm going to give you an example. President Obasanjo visited Kano. And if you doubt me, I can actually show you the news headlines. He visited Kano, I believe that was in 2001. And in just 4 hours that he spent in Kano, the Kano state government spent 10 million naira. This was in 2001 when the naira was, I think it was about 120 naira to $1 for 4 hours. So being a president and running a presidential system is very expensive. But if you now compare what this president is spending with what his predecessors have spent, you're going to see that, yes, this president has reduced costs. It's very easy to say, okay, he's spending XYZ amount and that one spent XYZ amount, but you've got to factor in the fact that the naira has been devalued because it has been floated. So take that in. Now, we're going back to the other issue of the presidential jet. The presidential jet, like I told you, this is a foregone issue. It is, in terms of dollar cost averaging, the most economic thing to do. On the vice president's residence, well, I'll tell you the truth. If I'm president of Nigeria and my predecessors have spent about 95% of the cost, And then I come in and they say, okay, well, all that's left is about 5% of the cost. I don't think that is going to be economically sound, economically prudent of me to say, abandon the project. This is a project that belongs to the federal government of Nigeria. It doesn't belong to President Bola Tinubu or Vice President Kashim Shettima. So at the end of the day, the project has, I mean, they've gone ahead. If it was at the initial stage, the conceptual stage, I do not think that a president like Bola Tinubu would have agreed to that kind of expenditure. But after he spent 95%, come on, you say, okay, because you don't want to spend 5% and you abandon the project, that is not sound economics.
All right, so let's move along to other things, Reno. So
Okay.
if you were to advise the president, for whom you have, been speaking very highly, what would you ask him to do to bring some succor to the masses of the Nigerian people that are suffering? Reno, what will you say to him on how to deal with the poverty, the levels of poverty that we are experiencing in this country?
I think he's doing the right things. Already, we've seen that he's achieved local government autonomy. A lot of the sufferings that the masses are having is because funds that are meant for the masses are being trapped somewhere between the state government and the local government. The state governments, they just seize these funds. Now, in achieving local government autonomy, we've seen that funds are going to be going direct to the local governments. Now, there's some hitches here and there. The governors are resisting. By the time that happens, you're going to see a lot of trickle-down effect. Now, another thing that has to be done is this. We're now seeing that for the first time, probably in history, but maybe they've done it before, I'm not aware, but we're seeing that the VAT figures for the states are being published. Now, what's that? Why is that good? It's going to engender competition. A lot of people are seeing that, first and foremost, Lagos in this last quarter generated more than the entire 36 states, the rest of the 36 states, or rather 35 states combined together. So when people see that, then this is what federalism is all about. It's going to make them more competitive because these figures are being made open, they're being made transparent. And then when you have a situation where you have the Tax Reforms Act, which has been passed, and then people are now seeing that the states are going to be getting more from their VAT, is going to make them work hard. A lot of people say, oh, well, a state like Lagos is making a lot of money because they have the ports. What about a state like Oyo? Oyo State is generating 3 times the VAT revenue for the federal government, for the federation pool, than the entire states, the entire 5 states of the Southeast. So if you take the states of the Southeast together, put all that they're contributing and multiply it by 2, that's what Oyo State is contributing. And how is Oyo able to do that? Oyo is further away from any port than the Southeast states. The Southeast states, they are closer to One Port. One is a fully operational port. In terms of investment, the federal government has invested more money at One than at the Lagos port. The most up-to-date Lagos port is actually not even a federal government port. It's the Lekki Free Trade Zone, which was built by Lagos State. So if Oyo State, that is so far away, it is the furthest southern state from a port, can make so much money, then there is no reason why other states cannot make money. So this local government autonomy and then the tax reforms bill are going to engender competition. And when there's competition, then you're going to see revenues increase. Already, we've seen that each state under Bola Tinubu, their revenue has increased, their internal generated revenue has also increased, and their indebtedness has reduced rather. So the president is doing the right things to spur revenue and growth in Nigeria.
All right, let's move along to political issues. There's quite a bit of buzz, about what opposition politicians are doing. And your former principal, whom you still have a lot of respect for, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, seems to be the arrowhead of the opposition. Do you have, and then of course, your good friend too, Mr. Peter Obi is involved, Hel Rufai is involved, and, quite a few other people. And they're saying that, look, we're going to do what APC did in 2014, 2015. We're going to come together and bring, our one solid front against the president in 2027. Reno, what do you think is going to happen in 2027 with all of this buzz?
The reason why Peter Obi was able to command some kind of following in 2023 is because you had 3 major Muslim candidates Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Waziri Atiku Abubakar, and Alhaji Rabi Musa Kwankwaso. And a lot of Christians and Southerners felt that the election was taking a religious tone. And so they backed Peter Obi. And they backed him for president. Now, what we're seeing with the coalition is that Peter Obi has been offered a vice presidential slot, and that there might be just one term presidency going to the north. That's their configuration. Now, I'm telling you, if Peter Obi accepts that, he's not going to get the kind of support that he got in 2023. First and foremost, the northern Christians, the northern minorities, what we call the Kwajaja axis, sometimes also called Kwararafa axis, which begins from Zulu in Kebbi State all the way to Gembu in Taraba State. They're not going to be in support of him. They're not going to support him. Why? Look, these people were dying on a daily basis under Muhammadu Buhari. A lot of these people, the first time they've been able to return to their villages is when Bola Tinubu became president and appointed Malam Nuhu Ribadu, who is our best national security ever, if you look at the achievements that he has garnered. So these people are not going to now vote for somebody who might make things go back. So Peter Obi is just going to lose that. Now, if you talk about Malam Nasir El-Rufai, now Malam Nasir El-Rufai was an incumbent governor. He was not able to deliver his own state. He lost almost all of the House of Representative seats to the PDP. He lost. I think he lost. I think in total there were about 16, and I think maybe the Labour Party got 2. And I think he got 1 for his son, and then the rest went to the People's Democratic Party. So he lost his states at the House of Representative level. At the Senate level, he lost his states. You know, all of the seats in the state, he lost them to the People's Democratic Party. So if as an incumbent governor, he was not able to win his state at the presidential level, and at the gubernatorial level, he almost lost his state because the candidate of the APC won by 11,000 votes. And this is as an incumbent. So if he performs so woefully as an incumbent, now that he's out of power, and then his governor is not in good terms with him, as a matter of fact, the Kaduna State House of Assembly has indicted him for fraud and for all manner of dishonest practices. And then just last week, a court, I think they gave an order of 900 million, awarded damages of 900 million against him. The man has too many things he's contending with, that he's not, in fact, he's just going to be a spent force. He's not going to be able to deliver anything to the coalition. As for Waziri Atiku Abubakar, because of my previous relationship with him, I'm not going to analyze him. I will respect him. This is a man who, I mean, we did not have any quarrel. I spoke to him and I told him, look, I'm going to be supporting Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu because I believe that the things that we said we were going to do during the election, during the campaigns, the man is doing them and he's doing them well, just as good as we would have done them. So because of that, I'm going to support him. So there was no acrimony between myself and Waziri Atiku Abubakar, and the man has been good to me. May God not forgive me if I turn around and I bite a finger that has once been very good to me. So I'm not going to analyze him. But this coalition, mark my words, it will fail. In 2014, when the APC came about, you had state governors. You had behemoths in the south and in the north. You had Muhammadu Buhari, the northern behemoth, and you had Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the southern behemoth, coming together with state governors. And then also they took a bunch of governors from the PDP and they formed the new PDP, which came together. You're not seeing this here. As a matter of fact, what you're seeing is the reverse. APC governors are with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and then PDP governors have come out to say they are also with him. I mean, I'm sure you've read that. They held meetings, they said, look, they are with him. PDP governors in the southeast, PDP governors in the north, PDP governors in other parts of Nigeria. So what we are seeing right now is just a shadow of what happened in 2014, and that coalition is going to fall up.
So what about if in the unlikely instance, which is what some of the obedient people have been saying behind the scene, that Atiku concedes to have Peter Obi at the head of the ticket? What do you think about that?
It's not going to happen. I know that for a fact that Waziri Atiku Abubakar is not going to concede. I mean, these obedience, they tend to be delusional. They tend to believe their wishes. I mean, to a large extent, it's very, very easy to cajole them to believe things that ordinarily they would not have believed if they were using their senses. So, I mean, if you look at a lot of them believing all these fantastical stories about Traore in Burkina Faso, which are obviously lies, in the fact that the naira has been devalued because it has been floated. So take that in. Now we're going back to the other issue of the presidential jet. The presidential jet, like I told you, this is a foregone issue.
Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, as we continue our conversation on the future of the country and a few other important developments, including the fact that the president has now spent 2 years, I have with me a very eminent Nigerian politician, scholar, and writer who was actually the founding national secretary of the Alliance for Democracy. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources the distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Professor Udenta O. Udenta. Prof,
Well,
welcome to Inside Sources.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
It's good to have you here at last.
Thank you. Yes. It took a while, but
Exactly.
I'm happy we're here together.
Thank you so much. So we start by just looking at where Nigeria is today. If you look at where we are today, where do you think we are going? Do you think we are headed to that destiny that we all know is our preferred destination of greatness?
A very deep philosophical question. It just threw at me like a bomb. How do I grapple with it? There are many sides or domains of life, or space of life, we can build, undergird this your comment around. Is it economic? Is it human capital development? Is it educational sector? Is it health? Is it the philosophical foundation of the Nigerian state? Is it constitutional order? For me, the critical element in underscoring this question and then pursuing that kind of vision of the future where this country is headed is the constitutional framework around which you build your democratic tradition. We have a presidential system that is supposed to, manage our liberal democracy in a federal format. If you don't get the democracy right, at the level of philosophical conception of the democracy, you cannot get any other thing right. Marx, for example, Karl Marx, which of course you and I know very well, that the history of every hitherto existing society is a history of class struggle. But all class struggle is a political struggle, even with the economic. So if you don't sort out the politics of the moment and of the future, you can't sort out the economics or any other factor of national life. So if you don't get the politics right, you can't get any other thing right in the future. We haven't gotten Nigeria right because we haven't gotten the politics right. The economic foundation is the base, I understand, but that base is managed. Human resources, capital resources, and so on, natural resources are managed by a group of individuals. In the democracy, they represent the people, they have a social contract with them. But what kind of democracy are you practicing? At the highest level of democratic explanation, you can say liberal democracy of the Western hue was implanted not only in Nigeria, but in Africa as a cure to the big man syndrome. Remember the big man of Arab Moi, of Bokassa, of Idi Amin, and so on, who they believed polluted the African political landscape, in personalized power, and be very authoritarian and very liberal in managing statecraft. So we needed to take a step back from that and implanted liberal democracy through the process of democratization, late 80s, early 90s. But almost 20-something, 30-something years, liberal democracy has failed Africa. Not in terms of its normative claims, liberty, pursuit of liberty and happiness, free press, constitutional order, rule of law, etc. These are normative claims. But in practice, it has never worked out. It hasn't worked out because it's an imposition. Remember the logic of the present conversation of Obasanjo himself is leading. How do we have an African-centered democratic tradition that leverages or privileges our past, our historical journey, our evolutionary pattern and trend, and not just something from outside? So when you crafted the presidential system in a liberal democratic format and say, power Nigerian history, power Nigerian development to the future, it can work. So that's a deep way of looking at it. In more practical terms, you can begin to splinter down what kind of constitution. We have a federal system because we have a diverse group of people, multinational, multi-religious, multicultural environment. So you need a constitution that reflects this unity and unipolarities. We don't have that. This constitution is only federal in name, but unitarist in content.
Okay.
That's one big problem.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's let's take that as an opening comment, and let me, kind of divert it more towards what you think ought to happen. I mean, you quoted Karl Marx, and Karl Marx also said that philosophers have interpreted the world
in various ways.
The point is to change it.
To change it.
How do we change this trajectory, Prof?
Now, when nations face existential crisis, you don't summon politicians. You don't summon business people or corporate leaders. A nation summons its intellect. China summoned its intellect when it was caught in a mix. First, how do you come out of Japanese imperial conquest of China? How then do we come out of the cruel period of the Civil War? When Chairman launched the long revolution, to launch the cultural revolution, when China stabilized as a nation that won independence in 1949, the key question was, how do we move China from that phase of convulsive cultural and social disorder to an order of modernity? So the Deng Xiaoping in 1978, with the death of Chairman in 1976, formulated with a group of thinkers a new direction in China, for China. What they call it? Practice overcomes contradictions, which means whatever you do, whether it is in mysticism, spirituality, whatever it is, capitalism, that helps China. It helps to elevate the human standard. It helps to lift up the spirit of the people. It helps to industrialize and modernize China. It's acceptable. And they classified it as socialism or Marxism with Chinese characteristics. Now, 30, 40 years, where do you have China now under Xi Jinping, towering virtually beyond the realm of humanity? China has gone almost ballistic, to use the current Nigerian expression. Because they saw the future. That future is, how do we construct a society that is modern, that is efficient, that is productive, we can lift millions out of poverty by leveraging on our history, on our civilization, and on our interrelations with the rest of the world. We borrow from Marxism, we borrow from capitalism, we borrow from the mysticism, from Taoism, from Confucianism, all are mixed together to create a new China. In Nigeria, we must summon the intellect of Nigerian people. Where are the scholars in political science and strategic studies? Where are the scholars in development studies? These are the ones, not theory. This time, we sit down with any government, with the government of the day, not this one, for example, any other government of the day that is interested in working for the future of the country.
Right.
We have to first and foremost, get our ideological direction, philosophical direction, constitutional direction, the kind of democracy that will work for Nigeria. If you get that and fix it, you will have a situation in which 30 years, 20 years, 40 years, will expect an exponential growth in terms of human development index. We expect a reduction in poverty. We expect many components of multidimensional poverty. We expect people having a better life, measurable in every human sphere. But because of an indolent mindset, federalism in this country is a settled issue for many. The presidential system is almost cast in iron, almost canonical. It's something which can't append. The way and manner the state, the subnational relates with the federal center is something which has been defined and nothing can ever change. The moment you find this same level of finality in terms of propositions about how Nigeria we march on, it can never make progress.
Okay, Prof. I mean, let's and I really find this quite insightful, especially what you said about the Chinese saying that
experiment,
practice
overcomes contradictions.
Contradiction. Very, very interesting. And I want to adjust that even practice at times even overcomes confession.
Okay.
Because you can say certain things and do a different thing, which is where I want to ask you this question. You were the founding National Secretary of the Alliance for Democracy.
Sure.
And that party, I recollect very well, came out of the struggle for democracy with NADECO, with Eastern Mandate Union, and Afenifere, coming together to define this kind of thought, came out of this kind of thought that you have just articulated. What happened to that idea? How did it die?
What happened is that today, in my moment of rationality, and everybody has moments of rationality, sometimes moments of fancy, and the instinctual thoughts.
Right.
You ask yourself, this debate about restructuring, beyond the theoretical, horizon of it, can it work? It's difficult to work. It's almost impossible to work. I don't want to disillusion anybody before I answer a question more directly. Okay. Mm-hmm. Why is it so? You need a gap in the constitutional order for you to restructure, or else the government of the day must self-implode as a deliberate, intentional choice, the way Fujimori did in Peru in 1992 or 1993. It's a history I do not want to repeat on stage with you here in this studio. A guy won an election, but they didn't like the constitutional order that he inherited and needed something better, and we know what he did. Let's leave it at that. If any government is not prepared to pursue that radical restructuring or reconstruction of the state in that direction, how then do you achieve a sense of restructuring when there is closure at the level of governance? There's a president, we have governors, local government chairmen, and other paratuses of state governance.
Right.
There's no way. And the Constitution permits itself to be amended only in a particular direction. The direction of constitutional amendment can never yield a restructured Nigerian state. So there are two authorities you have to do to restructure. I do not want, again, to go into details in there. One of them would be to overwhelm the state in some sort of direction in order to create that opening. That's what we had in 1998. Abiola won the election. He didn't realize his mandate.
1993.
He won in 1993. He won an election in 93. But about 1998, when he died,
right.
He didn't realize his mandate when he died in 98. And Abacha, who was sub power, died too. There was no democratic constitution. There was no civil order. Absalom Abubakar stepped in because the boys in that state come and step in. In essence, that was a moment of restructuring for the country. Because there was no constitution, there was no democracy.
Right.
And that's what Alliance for Democracy proposed. Actually, the coalition of democratic forces, NADECO, Izabande Union, Afenifere, and some other mass democratic movements said, we will not participate in the pyrotechnics of a transition program. They usually leave the ban on politics, leave the ban on politicians, form new political parties, set out a timetable, hold elections, swear people in, and after 2, 3, 4 years, another disaster. Let us restructure Nigeria now. That's opportunity, because Absalom Abubakar, you're not supper. He didn't win any election. He have no mandate. The man with the mandate had died.
Right.
In a sense, rather than a regular transition, let us have government of national unity. They now have a sovereign national conference. That's what NADECO took to him.
Right.
He was very smart. He said, I have no mandate, as you rightly said. Neither do you have a mandate. Our brother with the mandate is dead. So what we do now, it must then climb down from your high intellectual and ideological horse, form a party, and then implement this agenda. Rather than governing the country alone with absolute mandate, form a government of national unity. Rather than implementing the constitution we're giving you, show this aside and do a sovereign national conference. Brilliant argument, nonetheless. Our leaders and all of the younger ones went and formed Alliance for Democracy. But if you're not part of Absalom's government, you will never be part of the new order. So the PDP that emerged out of the womb of that government, was populated by people in that government. So you have to now find a logical, sequential movement from a military era to a militarized democratic format in which Obasanjo, another military leader, became president. Danjuma became, Minister of Defense. Jagaguzo became NSA. Abdullahi became Chief of Staff in order to hold the state together.
Right.
So AD now became
the opposition.
A fringe party, no longer a mainstream party with only 6 states to contend with in the Southwest. The process of implosion through various stages of internecine warfare is a story for another day. So
but just to follow up on that, and thank you so much for this insight. I remember that right on this show, before he died, Chief Ayo Adebanjo, who was also involved.
He was a founding deputy national chairman, ultimately became the chairman of the party.
Right. He said, on this show to me that one of the things that the Alliance for Democracy and Afenifere and all the people agreed was that when the governors were elected in 1999, and I want to check that with you, I'm sure he knows what he's saying, but I want to get your take. He said that the decision was that after the governors were elected, that they should insist that they should not go to Abuja, that they should insist on a new constitution, just like you said, a sovereign national conference. He said that was the agreement. But he said the governors, they bailed out. Do you remember that?
Let's put it this way. The facts may lie somewhere in between. Adebanjo was a grand, the theoretician. of a certain kind of political order and an ideologue of our struggle. And of course, his passage heralded for me the exit of a season of greatness of mind and largeness of heart. But the facts of the matter will lie in between. Our theoretical suppositions and wish as ideological force in AD can be matched with the brutal reality the governors were confronted with. You have 6 governors out of 36.
Yeah.
You're already in the minority. You cannot assist governors from the particular region of the country, hurting from years of destabilization and disorder and pain and anguish. And many went into exile, many died. And some people like us suffered massive detention because of support for democracy. And so these 6 governors will hold back the implementation of the result of the transition with the president sworn in and other governors sworn in. How the heck can you stop the march of this kind of democracy, as crazy as that democracy then was? What you can do is to persuade the rest of the other governors in the governors for me to say, hey, we participated in this process of change for the sake of it, for national stability. Now we've gotten there. Let us use the instrumentality of the offices we hold to call for this restructuring sovereign national conference. They tried to do so, but of course it was impossible to realize that dream. That's why I'm talking about closure.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the constitution was all about. We didn't even read it as leaders of the party. We just inherited the document. They hurried to take it immediately out of the space.
So if you remember that, even at the time Obasanjo was being sworn in 1999, there was no clean copy of that constitution.
So who the heck cared? It's now in future we are caring. We should have cared more then than we are doing now.
But I wanted to also bring out one important point. So you guys formed Alliance for Democracy. You were the founding national secretary. And the man who is currently today the president was a founding member, was actually the one that emerged as the governor of Lagos State in that 1999.
Yes.
With all the ideals that, most of you shared, and even people like us who were
elected with the emergence of AD as a new force,
exactly.
as a new kind of party.
So the progressive arm of the country was clearly, in tune with what AD was doing.
Yeah.
What do you think then happened that we now have Bola Tinubu, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu was governor then, who was an AD, went to become AC later. Why is it that after 2 years, we haven't seen a clear direction that goes to this idea? In your own view, what do you think is happening?
Okay, first and foremost, if you go back into history, because historical memory making or historicization of extant realities is very crucial in underscoring contemporary realities. AD failed in its mission of change because of what you can call a brutal contestation between the regionalist mindset and the propensity by the rest of us for a bigger national claim. We didn't see the ADs rooted within the Western region as dominant as the party was there. From the tradition of Awoism right through to UPN and then through to the Alliance for Democracy. We urged for a much more inclusive pan-national movement that will recognize and respect diversities. That struggle was very intense. It exhausted the moral principles and authority of AD and ultimately imploded its organizational structure. The governors who emerged, including Bola Tinubu, who emerged as the governor of the party, ultimately found themselves, in a situation in which the party no longer could represent that sense of coherence. That sense of coherence being the founding spirit of the party, the direction of the party, post-2003. If you recall, the party didn't feel a candidate reasonably as it were in 2003. The simple reason is that they wanted to cut a deal with the president, who didn't get much out of his own zone base in 1999. They didn't want that repeated again in 2003. So you outsmarted our party leaders and cut that kind of deal. But at the end of the day, he told them to flush everybody out. Except Lagos that survived. So the burden was then on that Lagos to now marshal the forces available, pull the resources he could, and then begin that journey. From that, you find that a level of contamination will begin to occur. That contamination is not of the soul of the heart, but of understanding of power. The transition from AD to AC, AD to ACN, ACN to APC was not a logical sequence of ideological growth or progression, but a practical, search for an SPV, special purpose vehicle that will drive the quest for power. So the weakening of the ideological, aura of that period, and then the emergence of what you can call an Milokan spirit, which is now predominant and preeminent in the governing infrastructure of the day.
Right.
It's what you can say that corrupted that original spirit of AD being an engine of change, a progressive direction for the country, to where you find today the struggle to even find a bearing. What kind of direction is the presidency of Abana Ahmed taking the country to? What economic plan do we have? What is the framework that has been carefully constructed, like mixed document, six document, list document? Where do we feed these economic options into the NEPAD agenda from 2001 to now? So if you look at all that, and then in terms of the political space, you find that it's shrinking. That's not what we urged for under 80. Those are those who went on exile, those who suffered detention here. Now you find in the rise of a hybrid regime, what they call this competitive authoritarianism, is neither democratic, neither it is completely authoritarian in nature.
Right.
Shutting down democratic spaces, manacling the media, destabilizing multi-party democratic framework by inducing crises in other parties. That's not the spirit of AD.
Okay.
That's an Emiloku
All right.
spirit.
Very, very interesting, and we're going to go up to that. But I wanted to ask, so you left AD in 2001. Why did you leave? So you left even before that, the 2000.
Yes, of course, but I still remain I still remain very influential in the face of AD for years to come.
Imagine, yeah.
Beyond I remember, for example, when Uncle Bala was crudely assassinated.
Right.
It should be later in 2001.
Right.
It should be November, thereabout.
In December, actually.
About December.
Yeah.
So I had left office months back.
Before that?
Yes, before then. The new chairman of the party, A. Abdul Kadir, was summoned or invited by the DG, DSS, and IGP to come and have a conversation because he died in his house and there were crises in the party in the Southwest and in Osun State. To know whether the crisis in the party could have played a role in what ultimately happened to him in that tragic fashion.
Okay.
He called me to come along with him. He told the DG, DSS then, Dr. Kayode, he said, I can't come and talk to you alone. It's only with that I can talk about the party. I'm just a new chairman. We went to see IGP Musli Smith, 2001.
Wow.
And Smith said, Udenta, I have your file. It's from this ground to this level. The same way that I will say, your file is from this ground to this level, but for good reason. Not because you're a dupe or a fraudster, but you suffered for the country. You're a patriot. So you suffered detentions multiple times. Can we have an insight into this question you're asking me? What happened to the party? What could have led to this? The point I'm making is that even when I had left almost 7-8 months back, I was still called upon to shed light. That persisted in 2003, 2007 before the divorce became complete. What happened was that the moment AD decided to call it some sort of a deal, not a Frankenstein kind of deal, but some sort of a Mephistophelian deal. If you know Mephistopheles, Mephistopheles, of course, was the devil that cut a deal with Dr. Faustus, who was a philosopher, a theologian, a doctor of medicine and science, but wanted more in life. He said, let's go to the devil and cut a deal so that I can become more powerful and preeminent. And he became dominant, punishing kings and popes. But then they would say, so time, you want to die. He said, give me life, but time was coming. And he said, can I change this deal? He couldn't change the deal anymore. He suffered the face of finality of death. I'm not talking about devil in the sense of a literal sense.
Right.
PDP wasn't the devil in that sense, but I'm just giving some mythical example that AD cut a deal with the president and his party, PDP, and said, we can survive together in the Southwest and across the country.
Right.
We help you to become re-elected, and then you help us to retain our power in the Southwest. They fulfill a part of the obligation. The other one didn't fulfill part of the bargain. So the rest, as they say, is history. So where we are today upon reflection is that AD, as a method in which you form a party, in which you reason argument, in which you develop thesis to govern a state, in which you try to marshal your ideas to say, what kind of vision do you have? If you go back to your first question, what kind of Nigeria are we anticipating in future? What kind of children and grandchildren, we're going to have? What kind of environment will they inhabit? That was AD then. But ultimately, with the decay of the political infrastructure in Nigeria and the fragmentation of the political order, in fact that even Bola Tinubu himself, as the former governor of Lagos State and currently the president there, had to move with the wind flow. The flow, how did the wind blow? You move with the political wind blowing you wherever it goes. So whenever it takes you to power, it's going to cling on to. You will not become an ideological vote to say, I will not resist, I will resist. This kind of level of contamination
Okay, let's talk about that contamination, and let's talk about it in a more realistic sense.
Okay.
You know, and I like your philosophical underpinnings, but for the benefit of our people, you know, let's bring it down.
Okay.
To heart. So, for instance, do you grant, you know, to the president that he has managed, you know, in spite of his other weaknesses, he has managed to be a consistent politician who stood in opposition from that 2003 all the way to 2015. Do you grant that? And if you do or you don't you see a difference in his own model, you know, with his strengths and weaknesses, compared to some of these other characters in opposition who don't seem to know how to stay in one place? At least Tinubu stood in opposition from 2003 to 2015. Do you grant him that credit?
Well, let me put it this way, almost as if you're a mind reader. I had a conversation repeatedly with some of my political associates, my friends for many years, some outside the country. And as if I'm going to go on television with what is going on with the opposition parties, with the defections, gale of defections, and a certain level of what I can consider political idiocy in terms of this mindless, spineless kind of politics we play now.
Yeah.
That he can say something for the president, as harsh as I have to be in many regards with the kind of governance, you know, method he has put out, the pain in the land, the suffering of the people for 2 years, and unremitting regime, you know, of social disorder and then increased security threats. The list can go on and on. What will not recommend me to support this president or even say a good word about it. But the only thing I can talk about is what you said. I said, you grant that to him. That in 1990, in 2003, when he managed to get out of that solve himself there, he didn't run to Abuja to say mainstream himself into the center. Like the governor of Delta State and the former governor said, we need to take our people to the center. An oil-producing state, stupendously rich. 3 main sources of money. Ecology fund comes to you because of the denudation of the environment.
Right.
Special derivation fund, 30% is built into that. Yeah. Then your regular allocation. And you still want to be enslaved, even though in a center that produces nothing and controls nothing in a federal system, in a way. Bola Tinubu did not run to the center. He dug in and began an incremental chipping away of what he felt was an organic power grab by the PDP.
Yeah.
He took Osun. He took Ekiti.
Yeah,
I think moved on to
basically restored,
and so on there. And then dug in as a regional leader and said, I may not get to the presidency as a leader of the southwest axis of the country, but I can now grow the brand. He tested it with Atiku 2007, who was a candidate of ACN.
Right.
2011 was Ribadu from the north again. Yeah. 2015 with Buhari
and won.
And he said, now it's a Milokun time. I have given this to everybody. It's my time to take it. So I have to give that to him.
Yeah.
And I wish the other politicians in the PDP and NNP would learn a lesson from this.
For me.
I said, I will not leave my party, Mr. President.
That's a very important point.
It's a federal system. You run Abuja, I run my state.
Yeah.
The money that comes to me should come to me, not because you want it, so you want to dictate to me.
It's because it's my right.
The Constitution has provided this money for me and my people.
Yeah, I mean.
So when you find what I call the decay of thought in Nigerian political practice, it's shocking and alarming. That's why I still love those people within the party infrastructure of PDP. For example, there was a neck meeting of the party, and I looked at that document signed by the acting chairman of the party and said, wow, Elijah Damagu as the acting chairman of PDP could put it up. It's very strong. Where did that meeting hold? The main meeting is held in the lodge of the Bauchi state governor, chairman of the party's governors forum. That's a certain level of strength. Yeah. To say, you've locked up the main office there.
We'll find a way.
We'll find a way somewhere to do this thing. I wish other members of the party, some other governors too, will learn a lesson. You don't insult the president as a governor. You don't put his government down anyhow. But you stay firm as an independent force to say, you are APC. Mr. President, we respect you as our president. I'm PDP. My task is to rebuild my party, reform my party, rebrand the party as an autonomous political force.
Good.
The governor should understand this.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I share that view with you. And, I want us to now take it to what is happening in the opposition and this idea of one-party state. I'll make a comment and then, you make your take. I don't think, Prof, that Nigeria will ever get to one-party state.
We will not get there.
I don't have that fear. But what do you think is, why do you think the opposition that we have today is so fragmented? I have a theory. I think what Atiku did in 2023, running for president at a time when the country had just had 8 years, in my view, seems to be the original problem of the opposition, especially of PDP. And you have to give people like Wike the credit of fighting him on that. Of course, Wike has his own other shenanigans that we'll just put aside. But the point I want to make is that why is it difficult for the opposition, Prof, to simply repeat what Tinubu did?
Okay.
Why is it so difficult?
Now, it's difficult, but it may not be possible. I can tell you about politics. In my place, in Igbo land,
right,
we call it Ndorondoro. Ndorondoro Ochichi. Ochichi is to rule, to govern.
Yes.
Ndorondoro is a struggle
for it
to govern. It push you like this kind of game, which you pull me here,
just
I
like,
pull you there.
Just like fella said. No, I think it was Shoika that said, I love my country, I no go land.
Yes.
He push me, I push him.
So
I no go go.
Ndorondoro means a process, almost a never-ending, inevitable process, as a consequence of change and search for power, and is a lures and accoutrements. Ndorondoro means that every day you meet, you talk, you quarrel, you disagree, you contest. At the end of the day, you come together. Politicians are ghosts. They are malleable, not just in terms of the material essence, morally and ideologically they are weak, but in terms of the spirituality. If you want endorsement by the Northwest APC ahead of time, Mr. President, they will give it to you today. The election is almost 2 years away.
Yeah.
Anything can happen between now and then, and endorsement will become non-endorsement or become fake endorsement.
Cool, yeah.
Politicians who are running away from the parties today may be escaping from some levels of pressure. It could be material pressure, it could be EFCC pressure, it could be ominous pressure, it could be intimidation, it could be money being dangled. We hear stories of special allocations, not the allocation you get every month, something that is kept and say, good governor, please, you collect this extra.
And that was the first part of the interview with Professor Udenta. We're going to be continuing with the second part of that interview at the next edition. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. Nigeria will prevail means that Nigeria will win because we will not relent. Hopefully one day we'll get a break. Thank you for watching. My name is Laulu Akonde. And by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.